The following is a production of Salt and Light Radio in Boise, Idaho. Kick off your work boots and pull up a boulder. It's time for Man Cave, discussing the issues that affect Catholic men in today's culture. Grab your favorite beverage, pick out a comfy spot around the campfire, and enjoy today's conversation with our two favorite cavemen, Pat King and Brian Howe.
Hi, welcome to the Man Cave Show. I have a special guest here. Eddie is gone. We got rid of him. Brian is too tall for the lens, so we've got here our own Canyon County Sheriff, Kieran Donahue. Am I saying that right? Is it Kieran or Kieran? Kieran? Okay. Well, you know.
It's close.
I talk fast and I can't, my tongue gets in the way. So anyway, Sheriff Donahue here is a man of many talents, many wonders. Today we're going to talk about his spiritual journey, his testimony, and then we'll get into some other episodes about his foundation he started, as well as how his relationship to God plays a role in his work life and how that helps him keep. I mean, he's not insane. I talk to him all the time. He hasn't gone crazy yet, and yet he's been doing this. How many years have you been a police officer?
And coming on 20 years.
20 years. And look at that. He only has a gray mustache. Of course, he hasn't taken his hat off yet. So now he is a true cowboy. I mean, not just wearing a hat because he's a Canyon County Sheriff. He's actually wears a hat because he's done rodeo and he's grown up in this area with this whole lifestyle. So this lifestyle as a countryman and the rodeo lifestyle has weighed huge on a lot of the things that he does in his life. It's kept him grounded. When you're working with the dirt and working with the soil and animals, it tends to humbles you because the beast is something kind of predictable and yet unpredictable. And so I do want to talk about his Catholic faith walk. And I want you to go all the way back to your underwater welding and all the things and how many times you would have been dead already. I've heard his story already. He came to my men's group several years ago, and it was a half-hour talk that turned into 2.5 hours, I think.
It could be.
With questions and answers. So I hope we have enough space on the hard drive to make this all work. Anyway, so start off when... I don't know where to start off. You tell me your journey. You were a little boy growing up in this area, and then how you were raised Catholic. I assume.
Yeah. I actually was raised over in Mackay, Idaho, so the big Lost River country.
That's a big town, right?
No, it's about 500-600 people.
Oh,
yeah. So
and is that central?
That's central Idaho,
okay.
And it's we grew up just under the shadow of Mount Bora, so the highest mountain range in Idaho, and we're a ranching family, and my mom and dad, of course, Catholic, and in fact, my mother converted to Catholicism when she was 18 years old from the LDS Church, and she had moved over from the Wasatch Front to Mackay, met my dad, and they were married, and but she converted before they were married to Catholicism, and she became really the pillar of the church there, and so 9 kids. They had lost a boy when he was young, but I was kind of down on the bottom end. I have an identical twin brother, so we.
Oh boy, that'd be fun.
We were a little rambunctious, but very hard working family. Yeah. Again, ranching, so lived in cow camps and raising cattle, and so we really had an idyllic childhood.
Did you own the acreage, or it was at least
both? My dad owned ranches and then sold them, and then worked for actually Hewlett Packard for many years. Owned cattle, but as a young boy or youngster, of course, we were altar boys, and my mom either were an altar boy or you had to sing with her, and I said I'll be an altar boy because I couldn't sing.
Thank goodness, yes.
Yeah, and so we were all through grade school and then middle school and even high school, we were still altar boys, and my mom made sure of it. And then I can tell you I was 27 years old and traveling through, and she'd still make me get up there because there was nobody there. And so it was really, we loved our faith. And
so did she just give you that look and like?
Oh yeah, and she was about that tall, and
I had an Italian grandmother about that tall, but could she look you into doing anything?
Let me tell you. So it was phenomenal. Again, the idyllic childhood, but the Western way of life, and everybody looked out for each other, looked out for your neighbors, and
Well, you had to because it wasn't like
there wasn't anybody else there.
There wasn't a Walmart down the way. You everything was a planned event. And when the unplanned came, everybody had to come to the rescue.
No, it's true. So my daughters are all Catholic, and I'm divorced, my first wife, but my wife and I have a daughter that I adopted when she was 5, and she's very close to my oldest daughter's age, and so they actually went through and became Catholic.
Okay.
And so that was fantastic. So we're very, I'm proud of my faith. I love the Catholic religion, and like most people, I'm not as good a Catholic as I should be.
What?
But I'm the first to say
You're not a saint yet?
Not yet. Not even close.
You're working on it, though. Well,
I don't know about that.
Some parts of his testimony and the things he's doing now, kind of, hey, we all got our past, and the part of it is what you do with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when did you leave the Mackey area, and what did you go do after?
Well, I right out of high school, my twin brother Kevin and I went underground in the mines, in the hard rock mining. So
in Idaho,
right there in the central part of Idaho, by Sun Valley, was not too far from us, and so we didn't have plans for college or anything like that, and really couldn't afford it anyway.
And you were still ranching though too.
Yeah, my dad was still ranching there, and so but we wanted to go do our own thing, and so we started underground and just some terrible injuries. That was really before MSHA was really in existence out in our part of the world, and so saw some terrible accidents. Had some terrible accidents happen to us, and I took a bad fall about a couple years in, and broke my back really bad, and the miners drug me out of the mine and got me to a hospital, and it took me about a year to recover from that. It's a terrible injury, and then went back into the mines, and sometime later a cave-in actually, the mine caved in, and I was at the front of the tunnel, and the timbers came down, broke my neck, and buried me actually, and I'd actually, it was the only time in my life I actually gave up that I can recall, and I thought, well, this is the end. And I was in and out of consciousness, and I found my light. It was because connected to you, and the tunnel was caved in. It was blocked off, and I was in an air pocket up at the face of the tunnel. And this miner, who'd only met that morning, I couldn't tell you his name. He had come to work with us from Montana, and I met him that morning, and I thought he was dead because I could see what happened behind me. But he actually saw it happening, and so he got out, and then he came back, and he literally dug through that pile to get to me, create a hole big enough to drag me out.
Because he knew you were there.
He knew if I was alive, he could get to me, and he got me out and put me in a pickup truck with a broken neck and a re-injured back, and drove me 2 hours to a hospital.
How long did that take you? Do you recall, or do you know? Are you aware of how long that actually took to?
Yeah, I don't know, because I was in and out of consciousness. It wasn't hours. I don't think it was probably less than an hour, but it seemed like eternity.
Oh yeah, especially when you've given up.
I kind of thought, well, and the doctor's like, you're, they're like, you got to get out of the mining, and of course, from a religious standpoint, a faith standpoint, God had just allowed me twice to still walk. It took some surgeries to get me back going again, but then I ended up in college and doing more adventures, and so had a lot of fun. But he
doesn't learn very quickly sometimes.
No, I don't. But
you're a lot like me.
I got into college thinking, well, I got to do something, and I actually was fortunate. I was going to school at Idaho State University in Pocatello, and I got a summer job on the Henry's Fork River, and through the university and the fisheries biology, and that's kind of paid my way for the next many years, and doing that in the summer times, fishing game, and learned how to scuba dive and snorkeling in Yellowstone National Park, and doing just exciting adventures. And I was kind of on that edge all the time.
A little safer in the water, huh?
At times, it got more dangerous as time went on, and because I always took a lot of risks, I was more of an adrenaline guy, and so then ultimately ended up, as you know, shipping out from Idaho. My first wife joined the Air Force after she got her pharmacy degree, and we went down to Arizona, and then did a bunch of adventures down there, and then moved on to Alaska. where I continued my schooling in my undergraduate, and then I was a qualified diver, and I ended up diving on the Exxon Valdez oil spill for 2 years through the Institute of Marine Science. So that was probably one of the greatest experiences and adventures of my life, but it was also very dangerous. And
underwater doing what?
We were the damage assessment team for the state and federal government.
Okay.
Because it was the largest spill that had ever happened in U.S. waters, and so no one ever knew what the Northern Pacific really looked like, and so we were the first to ever do anything like that on that scale. And our job, there's litigation against Exxon, so it was quality control, it was a criminal case. Our job was to statistically look at areas that were hit by oil, and then statistically look at areas that were geomorphologically the same but not hit by oil, so we could compare the data to what should exist and what doesn't exist based on the oil. And we had 3 teams: the invertebrate team, the fish team, and the plant team, and I was on the invertebrate team, but we all lived on a ship.
So refresh us real quickly. You're probably talking to a much younger crowd.
Okay,
I mean, the Exxon Valdez was what?
The Exxon Valdez was an oil tanker
and hauling
oil out of Alaska.
How many
Oh my goodness!
Barrels. I mean, it was a lot. It was a massive ship.
Massive ship. It's an oil tanker, and it ran aground in Prince William Sound.
By the pilot of
the captain was intoxicated.
Intoxicated, yes.
Yeah. And
so I wanted to let everyone know that it wasn't just careless. I mean, it was carelessness, but it wasn't like just some freak accident. It was done through negligence. That's why it was a
criminal case. Yeah. And so it was a very, very big deal, and they dove it for the first year before I got there, and then I basically begged the principal scientist to let me work, and he, for whatever reason, took a liking to me and said, I'm going to give you a chance, and it turned out to be a very good experience for both of us. And I was a young, adventurous man, and in shape, and you had to be, and we were doing 7 days a week, and lived on a ship, and we were diving every day, and they'd rotate you in and out by aircraft typically after 3 or 4 or 5 weeks, and you'd take a few weeks off and then go back in. Incredible diving. No one had ever dove the Northern Pacific like we did. So we discovered new plants, new animals, new fish, petroglyphs on islands. It was just a fascinating experience. But it was a going down and research, documenting what you saw. You'd gather samples, like for us the invertebrates, from this area that was hit by oil, and then this geomorphological area, an island point, a sealed fjord, a bay, the same thing. So the guys back at the lab would identify, what should be here, what's not here, why is this population decreased, and then how long is it going to take for the system to recover? It's a fascinating study, and but I dove with God, right? I mean, it's very dangerous when you're diving.
Well, no, that doesn't sound, checking a little fishies. That doesn't sound dangerous at all.
It was dry suit diving. There's so cold water. So it wasn't like a normal wetsuit. It's a dry suit. You're not on gas, but you're literally, there's no water gets in.
And a dry suit is what, like a big old?
It's a full suit, and you got thick insulated underwear that you put on first, and you put this what they call Viking dry suit on. Okay. And same for your head. And
are you weighted? You
have a weight belt
to keep you down there.
Yeah, and you got to regulate that with your regulator, your BCD they call it, your buoyancy compensator, and you're on tanks.
Because I'm a dry land guy, so none of this you're saying makes any sense to me at all.
I love diving, and it's just a different world down there, but it's very dangerous. So you have to dive by the tables, they call it, the dive tables established by the Navy. But everything's a little bit off because everybody's physiology is different. So there's levels you kind of go with.
Okay.
But even at that, you can get hurt really fast, really bad, and there's animals down there that don't necessarily like you in their territory, like sea lions that are very territorial. Okay. We had some run-ins with those. I had a terrible run-in with a wolf eel that nearly got me killed because I was running out of air and I was fighting him off. He was trying to attack me.
Oh, wow.
I was by myself at 75 feet under the ocean in a bad storm. And
you're not cabled or anything. It's all free. It's all free dive.
But that particular dive, to get to the surface, you did have to cable because the tide and the currents were so severe they'd lose you.
Wow.
And he was not going to give up that anchor line that I was trying to attach to. And my partner had left me. So it was.
So it was just you, God, and the.
Yeah, and I'll guarantee you pray. You pray, and he's like, and then it got to a point where I said, okay, I'm going to get hurt really bad here. He's going to get me, and then I just got to get to that surface. But diving, you just don't pop to the surface. You can only rise through the water column a foot per second, because otherwise, because your nitrogen your body is compressed by atmospheric pressure, so your nitrogen in your bloodstream has liquefied. And so it's liquefied. So if you go too fast, gas bubbles form, and that's where people have aneurysms and embolisms, and it can kill you or paralyze you. And so you got to off gas as you come up, and so then you have to take a 3-minute safety stop at 10 feet below the surface or 15 feet to try to make sure you don't have nitrogen bubbles in your bloodstream. And so. But when there's a monster attacking you, you kind of want to go to the surface.
And he followed you.
He wouldn't let me get to that line. He attacked me 3 times and tried to get my legs. He's 8 feet and has interlocking teeth. It's a scary situation. And so ultimately I got away from him, and I was running out of air, and I got to my safety stop, and it was terrifying, but it was fun, And then there were some times
you and I have a definite difference of opinion on what's fun.
You survive it. And, for your viewers, I mean, there was one time where my gas was not right. My air tank was not. There was something wrong with that tank. The mixture just wasn't right. And it created a nitrogen narcosis where, you're breathing bad air. And I was by myself another 70, 80 feet down, and my partner, a good partner, was working, but that's just what the job was. And you only have so much time at that depth, right? You're on a timetable, right? Because you're going to run out of air. And it's very cold. But that nitrogen narcosis set in, and I was hallucinating. And that's how divers get killed, because they're hallucinating, so they don't, you're not of your sound mind. And I remember distinctly to this day, I had a frame that I would use as my to draw these samples from, and the only way that I could stop the hallucinations and the panic was to put my head down into that frame and pray to Jesus to get me. It was the only, if I'd lift my head and I'd see things in peripheral vision through my mask, the whole world was different. It was charging me. But if I could get my head into that frame, and I'd pray and pray to Jesus, just deliver me from this. And it sounds corny, perhaps, but it's real.
Not to me,
because your life is in His hands. And
so you became aware of your narcosis. Your
I knew something was wrong. I was a well-trained diver. Yeah. I mean, we were pretty elite divers.
So how did you come up with the idea that you had to put your head in a box?
I think it's more of just natural. Just try to get rid of this peripheral world crashing in on you, and the monsters and stuff coming at you, and the panic, and to just focus. Because as you're a diver, you're trained. You got to focus. You can get out of most things, but you got to keep your head. You got to stay level and think. Yeah. Right. Go back to your training. And so once I get into my head into that frame, I was able to focus, and I knew something was dramatically wrong, but there's nothing I can fix here. So ultimately, I knew if my partner could get done.
Do you have any way of communicating with
No.
you? No. Okay.
We had no radios.
It's total silence.
Yeah. And you're a long ways down, and you can only go a foot a second to get up. So when he got to me, he realized something was wrong. He was a dive instructor, actually, and a captain of a fire department. He was a very good diver. And he grabbed me, which he did everything right. He kept me at arm's length so I couldn't take his mask and his regulator out of his mouth. But he just kept saying, look in my eyes, we'll get out of this. And he took us to the surface, and he saved my life. And so what was ironic, and I always, I couldn't tell these stories forever because they were so dramatic, but we got into our 12-foot Zodiac rubber raft in the middle of the ocean, right? Mm-hmm. And we took our tanks off, and we're taking a rest before we make our next dive, because you're going to go make the next dive.
Now, what time of year is this? Is this summertime?
Summertime, but it's in Alaska.
Okay, it's still cold.
Still cold. And so it wasn't like you get to go, well, I had a bad incident, I'm going to go bunk up. No, you're going to the next dive, because that's what your job was. So I took it off, and we're sitting there, and we have a tender in another raft, and he goes, "You ready to go?" It's been 30 minutes or 40, and I said, "Yeah, I'm cleared out." And we changed tanks out, and here's where God comes in. Again, I put that next tank on with my what they call a buoyancy compensator vest, and hooked up, and was just about to enter the water, and my regulator, which was on the last tank, my airline blew in half. But I was sitting in that raft. I wasn't 75 feet below the surface. Oh, my goodness. So God got us out of that water. Before I went back in the water, that airline blew, and if it had blown before or after, I wouldn't have made it.
So I'm sensing a theme here that God played an integral role in your life on many levels.
Oh, we haven't scratched the surface yet.
What? There's more? No, I've heard this story before, but it's always good to hear it again, and I hope the audience, a lot of you people gain some focus on why God is such an important part of your everyday life. Yeah. Not just on Sundays, but on a daily basis, on your every moment. It's always good to say a prayer. Did you say a prayer when you'd go in?
Yeah, and I'm big on saying, "Just be with me." And through the years, there's been numerous close encounters with death for me. Whether it was as a sheriff's officer, or as a sheriff, or in horses, and just so many things that I've been close so many times, but God's always delivered me, and He's allowed me to walk. I've broke my neck and back 4 times. The 2 times I talked about, and then in horses, because I trained horses and rode broncs for years. And He's always allowed me to walk again, and He's always allowed me to live through it. And but there's been some very pulmonary embolisms and things like that He's there's a purpose. And when people think, well, why are we here? Well, God's got a plan, and He's always kept that from me, but He's always guided me at the same time.
So how long were you in Alaska, and then where'd you go from there?
So I was up there for that tour. I was up there for 3 years. I was finishing my undergrad, and by that diving, I was offered a master's degree at the University of California, Santa Barbara, and I was going to take it. But I stepped out of school for a semester and gave a kidney to my older brother, who was diabetic. So I went and did that, and that kind of kicked me out of school for a semester. And then Exxon decided to settle, which was fine. They settled for $1 billion with the state and federal government. But a federal judge put a federal gag order on all of us scientists for 20 years, 25 years, that we couldn't publish any data, couldn't talk about our findings.
Wow, really?
That was part of the settlement agreement. And it just really ruined me on science. Here I was. I'm going to be.
You thinking you're going to make.
I'm a cutting edge science. Yeah. We're doing things that no one had ever done before in the world, and there's only 14 men in the world on that team, and God gave me the opportunity to be there, and I was like.
And now you can't even talk about it.
And we couldn't talk about it, so it really soured me.
Did anything get gained out of that? I mean,
there is the monitoring program eventually was put in place as to what happens in the next spill, but we were right there. We could have done all this.
Wasn't it a single hull ship, or was it? So they did do mechanical changes to ship holes to make this a less likely of a problem.
Yeah, but why not talk? But Exxon, that's what they decided to do, and so it really burned me out. I was like, you know what? This is not science. I've lost respect for the science. It's bureaucracy. And so my wife was getting out of the Air Force, and I said, you know what, I'm shipping out. And so I took a job here in Boise with the Intermountain Research Station through the Forest Service to go do science. And I'm 3 years in Alaska. It's pretty cold there. I don't know if you've ever been there. 70 below zero in the wintertime is not that much fun.
And we complain about our winters here in Boise.
It's horrifying. So anyway, I shipped down here and did some fascinating studies with wild and scenic rivers and salmon but then the same thing happened 7-8 months in. It's talking to the scientists. They're like, well, we're going to do this study so we can try to keep the cattle out. And I said, well, have we taken any data yet? Well, no, but that's not science. You don't skew the data before you go take the data to meet your personal agenda. So great adventures, but I was like, you know what? I'm done with the bureaucracy.
Unfortunately, that's kind of the way I feel is that they have a hypothesis or an agenda, and they want to do everything they can to make their agenda be the fact.
Yeah, it's so stupid. And because I grew up, when I first started science, I was on the Henry's Fork River and looking at the erosion, looking at cattle, looking at a magnificent river.
And you probably had a pretty good idea.
I did, because I came from all those industries, right? From mining,
first-hand experience,
from cattle, and so that's a balance, and I love that. And so when I did that, it was just, man, it burned me out. I was like, you know what, this isn't for me. So I left the science behind and became a professional horse trainer.
And that's the problem, I think, is that when you burn out someone who has reasonable, and this happens in almost every industry, especially the police officers and sheriffs, is that you have someone who's talented that has a desire to make things better, but because of bureaucracy or the agendas, they burn out and they leave, and what's left behind are those that have the agendas.
No, it did for me.
This isn't a politically correct talk show, by
well,
so just so you know.
But it did for that's what happened to me, and so I thought, you know what, I'm done, and so I can train horses, so I can ride colts. I'm a pretty good bronc rider.
And how old are you at this time?
I don't know. I feel like I'm 1,000 right now, so let me think about that for a minute.
I won't say you look like it, but
I was.
I saw you walk in here. It was a little creepy. No?
I was 30. I was 30. 30, 31, 32.
So all this has happened to you. I mean,
30. I was probably 29, 30 years old.
The roughest thing I did by that time, I was playing rugby and I got poked in the eye. I mean, good heavens!
I don't believe you.
Plants don't give me arguments. I put sod down and it grows, and then I cut it.
Yeah.
My life is simple.
Oh, it was a crazy life, and
you are still married to your first wife.
I was, and she was a pharmacist, as I said, and she got out. She resigned her commission as a captain in the Air Force. I loved the military, loved being there, but her and I were drifting apart, and more probably both of us. But I mean, I was trying to find my path, and that's really, I think you and I have talked about this. I had so many adventures. I was, God, what do you want me to do? And I couldn't figure it out. And what I was doing, I was being impatient because he had a plan. I just didn't know the plan. And
when we become impatient, we do really stupid things.
We do. And so I was kind of always living on the edge, and I felt comfortable there. I felt comfortable. And
because it was such a big part of your life.
Yeah, and I felt like, well, if I live, I live. If I die, I die. I'm good. And so, and I'm being very candid and honest, but that's what it was like to me. And so training horses and riding broncs, like, that's cowboy stuff, and it was fun to me.
Riding broncs in rodeos?
No, but I started colts, right? Yeah. So I was good. I was a good bronc rider, and then I started going through the divorce proceedings, and we had 2 little children, 2 little girls, and here I am going through a divorce. Finances are tough. I'm riding horses, and a horse that I can ride pretty well. God gave me talent, and so I'm riding a horse and thinking, well, you can't buck me off. Well, it turns out she could buck me off, and the problem was, I'll back up. A horse had rolled over on me and broke my lower back, and so
is this the third or the fourth?
Third
time.
And so I was like having a hard time, but I was living at a ranch, and but I couldn't walk. If I could get on the horse, it would separate my hips, and I could ride, but I couldn't walk because the sciatic nerve was just.
Oh. Man.
It was horrifying, and so I remember 2 days before Christmas that year, the surgeon said we got to go in. So they got me fixed, but I was still broke. So 60 days later, I'm riding horses, and I didn't think this horse could buck me off, but she proved me different. And so I know I'm going off, and I'm trying to save myself. But I ride in what they call an oxbow stirrup, so your leg's pretty well, your foot's pretty well in there.
Yeah.
And as I came over if I went off the right hand side, this is a bucking horse. My left leg came over the saddle and twisted and hung up, so I'm hung up upside down. Jeez. And the horse is still bucking. And when I came off, I landed on my head and broke my neck, and I heard it break, and I'm like, that's not good.
And you're still attached to the horse.
Well, when I hit my head, my foot came out, but I broke my neck by then. And I laid there for a while because there's nobody around, and I was like, well, better try. So I was able to get up and walk, and got the horse put away, and I went to bed, and I couldn't move the next morning. I was all day.
So you did,
and so
you knew it broke, you heard it break, and yet
I
you
was
just
broke.
go to bed.
I was broke. I had no money.
So I think at this point I'm wondering if God's going, did I create an idiot or what?
Yes,
I mean, come
he
on.
did. Yes, he
what is
did.
wrong with this guy?
He
I mean, I have broken his back. I've done all these things,
Yes.
and he keeps doing it.
Yeah, he absolutely created an idiot. But so
there's more to the story, huh?
there's more. I got into a hospital finally, and they're like, we got to do some surgery.
Did you walk into the hospital?
No, they kind of carried me and drove me in a
Come
private
get you.
vehicle, but no ambulances. But anyway, I got surgery, and they kind of fixed me up. So I went on and trained and became a clinician. I traveled the country doing clinics, teaching people how to train horses. And so it was about 10 years. And then my twin brother, who was just as adventurous, and he was an iron worker.
Should I get him on the podcast?
He's a really inspirational story.
Okay, well maybe I'll have to get him
tell
on.
you, when we were 18 years old, he was diagnosed with cancer.
At 18?
At 18, and he had a big thyroid, a big tumor in his neck, and they removed it. And we were mining. We were underground at the time. We were 18 years old, and then 11 years later, it came back with a vengeance, and it all through his chest and everything. And the John Wayne Cancer Institute saved him twice.
Wow.
In Santa Monica, California. And so I'm training horses. He had to have special goals in front of himself to not concentrate on cancer, to beat it. He is a very strong mentally guy and physically. And he'd kind of been doing iron work, but he said, you know what? When we were young, we were rodeo guys. So we were fighting bulls. The rodeo cowboy, we saved the rodeo cowboy in the bull riding. So he got his pro card at 36 years old.
Wow, that's like retirement age.
age. Yeah. So he fought enough and got his pro card and was fighting professional rodeos and fighting bulls. And so he called me and
fighting bulls or riding bulls?
Fighting.
There is a difference.
He's the cowboy lifesaver. He's the guy that goes in and saves the cowboy.
So just so if you haven't, I don't know how many people rodeo people or know it. Look it up. A bullfighter is the guy that once the rider is bucked off, laying on the ground, and the bull's just still running all over the place, kicking and screaming. These guys take the bull head on.
Yeah, and they
get in their face and put their bodies at risk to protect the rider who's laying on the ground.
That first year he went pro, he broke 14 bones, including his neck.
Okay, why am I interviewing you? Let me have your brother on.
He gets better. So he calls me and says, we want to start a professional bull riding tour. He do two stock contractors that are brothers, and then us as brothers, and we want you to be the president. And I'm like, that sounds fun. Let's do it. So
bull riding tour.
So we
is this akin to a PBR? Is this what led to the PBR?
Yeah, well, PBR was going already.
Okay.
Ours was called Professional Bull Riding Invitational. So we'd invite bull riders, and we'd take a city and we'd partner with that city, and I was the promoter. I'd travel out 250 days out of the year and put on these events and marketing and putting on the bull riding. I was the president of the program, and then my family would come, and Jeannie would play the music and the announcer stand, and it was very high. So
you're newly married.
I'm sorry. Yes, I got divorced and was married to my wife. We've been married 25 years next month.
Okay.
And
she's
Jeannie,
also Catholic.
She's the one that became Catholic.
Okay.
And so it was a blast. I mean, it's hard. But it was fun. I was working with my twin brother, and we had a company. And
did you tell her your story before you asked her to marry?
Yeah, I met her. I met her training horse. I met her. Training horses.
But did she tell her about all the other things you did?
Most of them. I think. I don't know. She was enamored.
She's probably she's probably finding this out for the first time. What? You never told me that.
She's phenomenal. No, I've told her everything. She's so much my best friend, and she's given me the courage and the faith to do what I do. So at any rate, she's a wonderful, wonderful person, and
I've met her. She's
so wonderful, and so we did that for about 3 years. and I got the program put on television. You know, our bull riding.
Is it
tour.
still in?
No,
still fun? Okay.
No. Once I was the CEO, I guess, and you know, I said, guys, well, and that's where God shifted the universe.
So you finally listened to God this time.
Yeah, more than I had been. And so my years in Alaska, my best friend was a state trooper, and he an Irishman like me, and so you know, he has his downfalls like I do because we're Irish, and so
there's something about the Irish.
There's something, yeah. And so
I'm glad I only got like 25% Irish.
Yeah, he's worse than me even. But he calls and he says, "Look," he said, "I'm retired from the troopers." He's a very well-known man up there, very famous. And he said, "But I'm now a federal game warden." He said, "I want you to come into law enforcement and go to work for me." And I had to pick up the phone off the floor because I was laughing so hard because you're an idiot if you think I can be a law enforcement officer. And I said, that's ridiculous. And I said, "Jim."
You won't get any argument out of me.
Right? I said, "Jim." Jim McCann is his name. Great Irishman, you know, Catholic guy too. And I said, "Jim, I'm broke to pieces. I'm 40 years old, and I can't get through the academy." And he goes, "Yeah, you can. Well, here's Jeannie. Like, you're doing it." I'm like, "I'm not doing it." She goes, "No, you need a real job. You've never had a real job in your life." I said, "No, I
with a paycheck.
I've had all kinds of jobs." And so she says, "No, you're doing it." I said, I don't want to go." And so I went.
And this was back in Alaska?
So I was living in Nampa, and I shipped out to Alaska. And Jeannie says, "I'm not moving. So, you know, you're going to take this job, but I'm not living there."
Smart woman.
Smart woman. And so this is what's really compelling to me about God, or one of the greatest things about God, and what he has planned for each of us. And I got there on a Sunday, and it's February in Fairbanks, Alaska.
Oh, my goodness.
It's cold, right?
Just a bit. Just a wee bit.
It's horrifying. It's dark. I didn't want to be here anyway, but I have a real good friend who was a doctor there, and he said, "You can stay in the basement of my cabin." And I said, "All right." I start the academy on Monday, right? Very intimidated because I'm like, you know, I'm 40, and there's all these young bucks.
The oldest rookie.
I'm like, oh my, and I'm broke to pieces, and so I'm like, all right. But the most compelling thing, and I think you and I have talked about this before, I couldn't talk about it for a long time because it was so emotionally draining for me to talk about. But on Wednesday night, the first week of the academy, I got there, start on Monday. Wednesday night, I called Jeannie and I said, "I have found where God prepared me my entire life."
Wow.
And I knew, and I get emotional talking about it.
What brought that about? What was the light bulb turning on that hit you like that, where you could make that statement?
Yeah.
After what you've been through.
Yeah. It was, I don't know. I can't pinpoint it all. I was I was only in the third day, but it was so fascinating to me, and the concepts and what we were going to be doing, and it just a feeling came over me, and I said, finally. And what I struggled with even through my first marriage was I wanted to have a career, right? I watched all these people have a career, and I didn't have one. I had all kinds of adventures, but I wanted that thing to say,
nothing to hang your hat on and say, this is what I do for a living.
And when he got me there, and then that first 3 days, it was a peaceful feeling. And I called her and I said, I found what I've looked for my whole life.
Was this like state trooper law enforcement?
No,
game warden?
Federal game warden. We were.
And they train just like any law enforcement.
You had to go through the same academy up there, and we worked for the Department of Defense actually, and because they own so much land in Alaska.
Okay. Yeah.
So 4 of us covered 1.5 million acres. That was our patrol.
4
of us.
That's a little bit of piece of ground to worry about.
Yeah, there's no backup. There's no radios.
And you were each by yourself.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
so now you have the human element, and then you got the grizzly bear and the other, all those other
and
elements.
the bad guy element.
The bad guy element.
Yeah, the people who are not really. They don't like cops. Period. And so,
I think I met a few of those.
Yeah, and up there it's a little bit emphasized more, but it was really about. That's what I find so compelling about our faith and our religion, I'm staunch Catholic guy. I mean, again, I'm not as good a practicing Catholic as I should be, but I believe in it, and I believe in the structure that I was brought up in.
Your faith guides you.
My faith does guide me every day. And so that moment in time, that third day of the academy, and that was 20 years ago come February. So
it's a roundabout way from fish and wildlife and the marine life and bucking broncs and teaching rodeo and clinics to now I'm a cop.
Yeah, and I did very well in the academy. Graduated probably third.
What was the physical aspects? I mean, it's winter.
Yeah, so we trained inside for the most part till we got towards spring. It's a long academy, 10, 12 weeks.
And how rigorous was the physical aspects?
You're going twice a day, PT twice a day.
And how'd you feel?
I thought I was going to die.
I mean, you're an old man at 40.
I was an old man. I mean, I was older than most people at 40. I thought I'd die, but I teamed up with the one younger guy he was a real good athlete, and we just trained all the time.
So
I'd go out on snowshoes and train. I'd just go hiking on snowshoes.
I know. I've been on snowshoes.
Right? So I just needed anything to get me to be competitive with these guys.
Yeah. So now you're in the elevation. You're probably doing a lot of this in the dark too, because
it was dark,
low, and then it's cold.
And as you get towards spring, when we graduated, it was better. But
yeah. So how did the? I'm sure there was most of these guys were in their 20s.
Yeah.
Did they give you nicknames? They call you old man.
They call me the old man.
They give you a hard time.
No, they call me the old man.
Or did they see? Well, shoot, he's kicking my butt.
They call me dad. They call me old man, senior citizen. They call me everything. And what was funny is that I did outdo a couple of them. And like I say, graduated top of my class. And I actually, they asked me to give the commemorative speech at our commencement.
Really?
The commencement speech.
And how long? This is a 6-month? What?
It was a 10 or 12 week academy.
Okay.
And it was long enough, I can tell you that. But so it was pretty cool. They honored me with that, and it was. And my wife Jeannie flew up for it, and that was the only time she ever came to Alaska.
So 12 weeks of training, you probably didn't get to go home.
No.
And so, how often were you, once you were in that field, now you're working for them?
Yeah,
because they
so I'd get home
you.
every couple of months and get to go home for, a week or so, and I'd work a lot of overtime, so I was able to flex some hours.
And where were your kids?
They were all in Nampa.
So, so you're able to see them?
And Jeannie built a house while I was gone. So
without your permission?
Yeah, she had it, but...
She probably built it exactly how she wanted it.
It was hard. Her and 3 little girls in a camp trailer while she's building the house. And I felt so bad for her. But I'd get home and work.
But you got a job.
I had a job, yeah. So
she was happy. My husband finally got a job after all these years.
At least I had a paycheck. And so it was pretty cool. And she had gone through dental hygiene school by then, and so she was a dental hygienist. And
in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. Be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, cast into hell Satan and all the evil spirits who prowl about the world seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. The Father, and the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Man Cave, a weekly podcast discussing the issues that affect Catholic men in today's culture. A production of Salt and Light Radio in Boise, Idaho. To learn more about our ministry, please visit our website, saltandlightradio.com.